Hey, everybody. Welcome to the September 10th edition of the PPP forgiveness crazy train. So I'm wearing this shirt today. We're forging ahead while Congress continues to duke it out. So hopefully they'll play nice. Have you ever wondered if we were the parent and Congress was in the back seat and there were the two kids and we drew the line and you said, quit fighting, don't make me come back there? I think it would be a good thing if we would do that, because I don't know that we're getting anywhere. Jack Centinello is going to be joining us, and I know he's coming in hot. He's got another engagement that is probably a paying gig, and so he's going to be coming in and joining us. But Adam, and we also talked, we felt kind of validated yesterday because there was a CNBC article that that basically validated our stance, which was, hey, don't be the guinea pig to be the first to ask for forgiveness, because there might be some other stuff coming on. So also, one other thing before I pass it over to Adam, if anybody, hopefully you've seen this image, but I think this kind of fits. It's a tug of war between these two dogs, and one is the Senate, one is the House, and then relief is in the middle. So anyway, trying to make the most out of this crazy situation. Adam, what are your thoughts on this whole thing? Anything you want to elaborate on?
Yeah, I think, the couple big things this week that are pretty aligned with things that we said in previous webinars. One is that on the payroll tax side, this was the executive order. We really haven't seen any clients that are going to, and we're not doing it ourselves, take advantage of the executive order. And I use the term advantage loosely. It's like, I don't want to discount the fact that the administration wanted to try to do something that was helpful, which is put more money, in people's paychecks if they really needed it. The problem, like the spirit, I don't think that anybody had a problem with the spirit. The problem really comes down to the implementation and the execution. And the reason that I don't think employers are jumping on board with this is that, first off, it basically all comes down to they're in charge and they're responsible for ultimately responsible for the money. So what ends up happening is, you decide as the employer that you're going to allow your employees to participate in the program, which basically means that Gary can now say, hey, don't send my withholding and payroll taxes to the IRS. I want to put them in my pocket. Well, Gary can do that for 3 months for 4 months from September through December. And then Gary needs to repay it back starting in January of 2021. Well, the problem is the payback. How does Gary pay it back? Gary pays it back by taking a lower paycheck, because now he not only has the original withholdings that he always had, but now he's got to pay back what he put in his pocket from September through December. So Gary goes from getting a pay raise to a pay reduction during that period. Well, if Gary, the challenge is I have to implement that as the employer by giving it to Gary and then withholding more of it and getting it to the IRS when it needs to be repaid. Well, if Gary quits, guess who still pays? This guy. So I effectively would end up paying it twice. If it ends up being a complete forgiveness for Gary, I mean, that's got to be an act of Congress. And I don't say that like in the classic, an act of Congress. And it literally would have to be an act of Congress to be able to actually forgive it. And then you enter into a whole bunch of fairness issues, meaning, if Gary decided that he wanted the money, but then another person didn't, how do you get those two people square? So I haven't seen anybody go through with implementing this. I think, oh, that's hysterical, Jack. You win this week, sir. Game on. I haven't. He'll talk in a second. Say hi, Jack. You still have your sound cut off.
Hello, everybody.
Yeah. So the movie theater is pretty awesome. Thank you for that. It's just we haven't seen any employers from our client base are taking advantage of it. I think that the city of Charlotte voted down, wanting to do it, at the government on the government side of the equation. I guess not surprisingly. So just really, I haven't seen anything from the payroll companies on how it would even be implemented if somebody opted into it. So just don't see a lot of movement on that front. We're also starting to get more questions about the filling out of the loan forgiveness application. I think that's fine for people to start thinking about that process, but at the same time, unless you are straight up, no questions asked, 8 weeks, no headcount reduction, no salary reduction, no disruption that I saw on the horizon, and fully deployed the money in the correct ratios. Again, I don't even know how much effort I put into the application process at this point. So, we have seen some people try to get their documentation buttoned up now that they deployed the money, or banks have started, sending the notices that they could apply. But, everything that you're seeing from the literature and the pundits is to just wait, because more stuff could change, and there's no requirement to go ahead and submit the forgiveness. So there's no medal for being first other than just getting it off your books. So that doesn't even consider, the taxability, like still the taxes being unknown, and that in and of itself being a reason to delay. So I think, most industry experts are saying, if but for no other reason, to wait just to see if more stuff comes out, go ahead and wait. So I would encourage everybody that watches these to, go ahead and know whether or not your ducks are lined up in terms of whether you're going to be forgiven or not, in terms of making sure you deployed the money correctly. You'd start asking the questions, but I wouldn't put a ton of effort into the paperwork really at this point, because it really, likely will change at some level coming up. And Jack is always way better at this than I am. So I'll just mention that there was another, Senate skinny bill. Jack may be able to talk about a little bit about what's in it. But those are the big things that came out this week that we've seen.
All right, so happy to do that. I didn't know if you had started into that already, but I am happy to share the Cliff Notes version. It's funny, I say that to my kids. They have no idea what that means. The Cliff Notes version of what has happened, or what was proposed essentially Tuesday evening by Senate Republicans. And so basically it is a proposal for second round of PPP loans for small businesses with 300 employees or less that have seen a 35% drop in revenue in one quarter in 2020 over the same quarter in 2019. The maximum loan would be 2.5 times the average monthly payroll and capped at $2 million, which is different than and less than the 10 million maximum offered through the original PPP program. Eligible expenses categories have been expanded, so it includes certain software, supplier, and COVID-related preparedness cost, the streamlined forgiveness for processing of loans under $150,000, and provide additional $50 million to be used to augment audits of the PPP program. So basically, they're throwing $50 million into the policing fund for these loans. And so there is other legislation provides a shield for businesses and other organizations against COVID-related claims, and creates a federal cause of action to create a standard that would apply across state lines. So basically codifying some of the rules so that the feds will interpret issues rather than leaving it up to the states, state by state. There's other things in there, $300 per week in unemployment benefits, which is not the $600 that everyone was hoping for, and increases charitable contribution tax credits. It doesn't provide the $1,200 per person checks that was hoped for. And one of a commentary in response to this, the GOP skinny bill simply does not achieve the scope or scale of relief needed to prevent large scale small business failure in the COVID impacted small business sectors. So, that is what's there, and could be as tomorrow, next day, different. And to give Gary some credit on the graphic that I used, which I think is really cool, there was also a comment that said the sticking points in the negotiations are largely the same as they were when Congress left DC. So recall that everybody's back in town at this point. Republicans have proposed a 1.1 trillion package, while Democrats have lined up behind the 3.4 trillion House passed bill. So there's the tug of war that's going on with the dollar amount, but also the programs that are being implemented and how they're being implemented. I will also say that while we've been focused on these things, and I think generally business owners are focused on those kind of things, there's other things that are in the package that a lot of times stall things. And we don't hear about that. And that's called, people call it pork, people call it, add-ons, whatever it may be. So, there's a whole laundry list of things related to the postal service, related to educational support, 529 plans, critical minerals. The Senate Environmental Committee bipartisan proposal to make us less dependent on China and other unstable, unreliable, and hostile regimes for critical minerals. So there's other stuff in there that is just marring the ability to get this out. It's typical. I'm not saying that it's anything different than what typically happens when you go through the proposal for making a law, but it's things that we don't talk about kind of in the background also going on that need to be worked through. But obviously the focus is on the financial aspects of the direct financial aspects of the Republican proposed stimulus bill. There is little hope that this is going to go any farther than it has necessarily, and not just because of the money, the gap between the dollar amounts, but just the implementation and also the potential lack of policing of those funds, as we've seen and we've talked about seriously and jokingly about the abuses that it appears that some people have used the money for improper purposes or received money that maybe they really didn't need under the circumstances. So a lot of things that still need to be worked through, unfortunately. So I don't see I don't see the light at the end of the tunnel quite yet. So
yeah, and I think it's related somewhat, but to get on the soapbox, I mean, the only people who always seem to always get paid while others aren't is Congress. So it's just unbelievable how that works. And while we've seen some clients that have had disruption, some clients that haven't, it does take a moment to think about, well, what are the big things that are shut down? I mean, I drove back, passed by Carowinds. I mean, that Carowinds, think about all the people that they potentially employ, all the people that work in food service on all the college campuses. Think about how many people they employ. And where that really resonated with me this morning is that, I had a call with one of our clients that does recruiting within our industry. And, they said, at some of our peers that are much larger, they're not really doing layoffs, but what they are doing is finding reasons to fire people that would have been unheard of, that when I worked for the Big Four, that somebody would have been fired for. So, it's like making it, in other words, you wouldn't really ever get fired for making a mistake. We would call that a training moment for you so that you could learn. Well, now they're getting fired for it. So it's just, it really, I think you see the unemployment numbers change a little bit. You think, oh, maybe things are different. Maybe things are rebounding. No, it's still a bloodbath out there for a lot of people. So it really is not awesome, in my opinion, that regardless of which side you fall on this one, that they can't get something done. And I'll shut up now and get off my soapbox. Sorry, Gary. You can edit that out.
No.
The video portion.
The reality is term limits would solve a lot of that. I don't know when some people, when they can make the laws and not have to abide by the laws, that's a sweet deal, evidently. But
I love some form of a pay for performance scheme where it's a combination of like, deficit spending, GDP growth, infrastructure, like all the stuff that we elected them to actually get taken care of. They're paid based on their ability to actually deliver on those things versus just if you do good, you get paid. You don't do good, you get paid. And by the way, it's hard to not get reelected. So.
Yep. That's one of the blessings of the free market that all of us abide by, and we survive by, and we thrive by, quite frankly.
That's right.
Is based on performance. So anyway, just a reminder, thanks everybody that's been on here and humoring us, and hopefully you're enjoying the show with Shoemaker logo with Jack in there. He does win the best background award today. So just a reminder, hit the Q&A if you got questions, hit the chat if you need to chat, and that's fine. And I'll just throw this out too while somebody's trying to formulate a question. I love this George Burns quote that I found yesterday. Too bad all the people who know how to run the company or country are busy driving taxi cabs and cutting hair. Boy, isn't that the truth? Funny guy. All right. Any questions out there? I know there got to be some. Here's a
I'll just say that it's also unfortunate that this is happening at this time. We're in renewal season for Senate and House seats, both on the national level and on the state level. And so, what I see is you have people that are leveraging. I mean, just turn on your TV in the morning, and it's just and it's the competitors. So you have an ad for one person that's running and then one person who's the incumbent back to back at each other. And I'm wondering if the television executives purposefully do that. Like they offer a service that says, hey, your competitor has bought these slots, and so you think you might want to buy these ones. And so you hear all the bad things that each person has been doing. Or it was very interesting in my daughter's taking a AP government class, and they were talking about there was a case from the century, it's been decades ago, that dealt with the indirect money contributions to candidates by those indirect ads that you see is like, please, next time you talk to Senator Burr or whatever, tell him this. And it's obviously, stop doing what you're doing by way of example. And so it's just very interesting to see all of this going on at this time. So from that perspective, but horrible that we're going through this crisis at this time because they are so distracted. These people are worried about them getting reelected. So they're spending, an inordinate, disproportionate amount of time focused on their own survival versus the survival of these businesses at this point. And, hopefully we don't have to wait until after November to really get things going. But I think as we get closer to November, we're going to have, it's going to be a slowed down process in getting anything moving forward because there's just too many distractions. So not to be all doom and gloom, especially on kind of a gloomy day here in Charlotte, but it's just the reality. And so while we can sit here and chat with you and say, these are all the cool things that the Senate the Republicans have proposed, who knows where it's going to go at this point. And, as far as forgiveness goes, I mean, hopefully when this distraction is done, something will happen, but I'm just not overly optimistic that it's going to happen anytime in the near future for all of us. Yeah, hopefully I'm happily surprised.
And I think related to that, some other questions that we've had in the last few weeks is to, I think we'll probably do some form of whiteboard presentation on this coming up. So keep me honest on that, Gary. But a lot of people have asked, well, what do I do, with PPP funding if I use the money for its intended purpose, but I didn't actually use the cash? In that case, you still really don't know what's going to happen going forward. So, our bias has been, and frankly, this has been confirmed, from some of the bankers that we've talked to, is that you really need to be looking at it as if it was a capital infusion. and treat it, treat it as such. So, with that in mind, what we advise people to be doing is that until they resolve the tax side of the equation, at least reserve off 30% for taxes. That's a chunk of cash that you need to keep reserved off. And then, factor in what's your tax liability look like, with it. That's going to be, some amount of cash. And after that, kind of set your working capital target that you need to set. And then with whatever's potentially left, I think a lot of what you do with your future planning for 2021, as best as you can predict it, is going to predict what happens to any excess cash, whether it, stays liquid as excess cash, you use it to retire some debt that you could replace if you needed to, if things started getting pretty bad, you make some, again, remember, this wasn't the intended purpose of the money. This is where you have extra cash just because of how the money was deployed. But if you make some investments to make some money, that's probably fine too. Again, that, the thing you probably don't want to do, because, how when you really piss somebody off, that phrase, it's still raw, we can't joke about that yet. Same thing applies. I mean, what I wouldn't do would be to, upgrade my house and buy that beach place in Miami, at this point, with a big fat distribution myself. What I would do was to continue to be wise and make, sound business choices with any cash reserves that might have been developed out of this.
So here's a question from Jim. We've had an employee terminate their insurance coverage. They have obtained coverage someplace else. Does this factor into the 25% salary reduction calculation for forgiveness purposes?
No, because salary was just salary. So health insurance factors into the overall payroll cost that you're asking for forgiveness. That salary is just that, it's straight up salary, not any additional benefits like retirement or health insurance.
Anything you'd add to that, Jack?
Yeah, and that sounds right. The only thing I'm thinking of is that, okay, so salary, yes, it's linked to the reduction, but what if the employer no longer offers the program? In other words, this was an employee making a choice to go elsewhere, maybe because a spouse has a better plan or something along those lines. But if it were a benefit that was removed by the employer, I don't know if that makes a difference in the scheme of things as a reduction of salary if there was a component that was covered by the employer that is not now covered. So that's just kind of a caveat maybe.
So I've got a question actually for the 39 people that are on this call, which is still amazing to me when I think about, there hasn't been anything substantially new from Congress for a while, other than some interim finals and, other oxymorons. But here's a question to you guys, and that is, you've got some really smart people in Jack and Adam on here that we went into this thing early on because there were a lot of questions that business owners had out there that we wanted to address the best that we could, knowing that we were putting ourselves in a bit of a vulnerable position, but it was important because we're all business people too. And so we don't want to be taking your time unnecessarily, but we do want to provide you value. So some questions that I've got back to you are, what are the types of things that you would like us to be addressing specifically if we continue to languish for a little bit? We're happy to do that. And it seems to me like this is a great opportunity for you guys to pick the brains of some pretty smart people that have, typically been on very expensive hourly rates, and we're doing this for free. So think about that. And if you have any thoughts, please hit us up on the Q&A and that, or you can even email me at gfrey@trustbgw.com. And again, just as a reminder, we will put this up on the BGW YouTube site later on today, and there's a whole bunch of weekly videos that are still up on that, and we'll keep them up there. Any other questions from the gallery? Joe's been silent. He hasn't been harassing us. I'm surprised. Hey, Robert, good to see you. If a business applies and receives for EIDL during the PPP period, do they have to claim on their forgiveness application, or because it was done post receipt of PPP, is that okay? Good question.
I believe the grant amount still needs to be reported on your application for forgiveness, which was the up to 10,000, up to 10,000 in total, I think, but $1,000 per employee. Still needs to be reported, but the total dollar amount, I believe, is not included. So then the question would be, so the only scenario where I'd see, well, hey, I might really want to consider that would be PPP funding, forgiveness granted. Now I'm going to get an EIDL loan. I suppose you could do that, but I don't know if I'd recommend it at this point. Sorry about the dogs there, guys.
It wouldn't be a live webinar without some dogs.
Right.
Joe, thank you for coming through on this, man. This is awesome. I would not know what to do on Thursday at 11 a.m. if you were to end this conversation. Make some money. But thanks for being here, Joe. And Robert, why not do the EIDL after the PPP period?
I think that you could do that. The only issue that I would have would be depending on the reason why you did it, you're potentially losing the flexibility of having, and when I say period, I'm being real specific to, I asked for forgiveness. Because I think it's a little bit gray that if you're out of your covered period, you haven't applied for forgiveness, you apply for EIDL, you need to include the grant money. I would say, look, if testifying before court, I probably would feel like I would need to include that. I cannot win that before a judge, regardless of what the form says. If, however, I'd already been granted forgiveness, it's off my books, done and dusted, then I get a grant and the loan, I don't have a place to report it at that point. So I could testify before the judge and say, where was I supposed to report that? My PPP loan had already been forgiven. I think the only challenge you might get into is just, the EIDL program has had some fluctuations in terms of the amount of the funding. So when I say, don't recommend it, I mean, I just, I don't know if the benefit of getting that grant to be free money is worth the cost of waiting and then not having something good happen on the outcome, just because there has been so many fluctuations in the EIDL loan program. So plus, you kind of lose the flexibility of, deferring the tax liability if you end up, going ahead and applying for forgiveness now. So I probably would do both at the same time, just knowing that, I'm going to have a 10 grand loan at the end if it was me.
All right, good answer. Hold on here. Oh, thanks, Vicky. So I'll just message this to everybody else. Future topic suggestion. Seem to have lots of contacts with bankers. Would appreciate it if you would check in, survey a few of them every once in a while and ask them how their experience is going with forgiveness applications. Specifically, are there loans they refused forgiveness to, and what were the reasons for turning down the loan for forgiveness? That'd be very interesting to know. Ooh, that's a great suggestion, Vicky. I like that. I will make sure that I'm going to take a quick screenshot of that and so that I don't forget it.
And I would say I'm happy to do that pursuant to whatever instructions or parameters the disclosure tells us. Likely, okay, obviously no disclosure of specific information, maybe not even disclosure of the bank as to that, but kind of more of an anonymous survey as to what's going on in the banking world. Certainly happy to start asking those questions when the forgiveness process actually ramps up, that there's sufficient data to report on.
That is why Jack Santaniello is on this call for us, so we don't get in more trouble than we should or can. Thank you, Jack. Questions or comments out there from the gallery or the theater in Jack's case? All right. Any parting thoughts, Adam or Jack? Feel free to hit us up with questions, but thank you, Vicki, for that. That was a great suggestion.
I would just say that, document everything. I mean, it's, you don't know where things are going to go and what's going to happen with certain relationships, whether it's with your landlord, whether it's with a trade creditor, whether it's with, your secured lender, whatever it may be. Just I've had situations where clients have had to reconstruct the recent past history, and it's difficult to do. It's emotional. It is, you're trying to remember things, and then, it's just human nature. And I do this with any matter that comes, and there is a history that at some point down the road, if it isn't able to be worked out, that you're in litigation mode, and then you have to put forth the story as concise and clear and true as you can. So for example, I will tell a client that if you know what happened in April of 2020, you think it happened on April 20th, but you're not sure, don't say it happened on April 20th. Say it happened sometime in late April. And I've said that before in these conversations, but you just keep track of things, of what's going on, maybe the reasoning behind certain decisions that you've made, certainly on things in relation to your business operations, whether it is the relationships with employees, offers that were made, the offers that were rejected, and other things. Because I will also tell you that with respect to employees, in some situations I've had to deal with, and I'm having to deal with, that employee's memory has not been accurate. It has been modified to suit the circumstances, and typically from an outside influence, whether it's a spouse, a friend who's a lawyer, and so it's like, wait a minute, what, that your employer did that, and so I'm just suggesting to you that, we as human beings behave a certain way under certain circumstances, and I'm seeing this kind of behavior in a very stressful environment. So that's a nice way of saying, make sure you got your story straight and you got it in writing, and make sure it's accurate, just in case you need to refer back to that story down the road.
Got a few more questions that have come in here. Omar, good to see you here. Here's Omar's question. Have any banks actually started processing or approving forgiveness applications?
Processing, yes, in the sense that the client applied and the bank accepted it. To date, I don't believe we have any clients who have actually received something back that said, loan hath been forgiven. And I don't know if we will, because even within those applications that were submitted, it's hard. I haven't dug into it, but it's also hard to gauge that, was that the official one or was that the, hey, go ahead and submit it, but we're going to wait to actually acknowledge the submission, so then our 60-day clock doesn't start to then have to grant you the forgiveness. So, we do have some people that have submitted, but it's been the minority. A lot of that's actually been predicated on our advice to wait, but it's really been the minority.
Yeah,
Next question
I was
is,
going to say, we haven't seen any golden tickets either yet be produced for clients.
yeah, we'll have to take a picture when somebody does have the golden ticket and do a, American Idol moment. This is from Jim. We're a tax-exempt nonprofit. Will loan forgiveness be treated as unrelated business income, which will be taxable? Good question.
It's a good question. There hasn't been any guidance on whether or not that's UBIT. I mean, I could see why someone would say that it would be, but if you think about it, I mean, you're kind of in the same boat that you're just not deducting the expenses associated with what you spent the money on. So the proceeds aren't going to be taxable, but you're not deducting the expenses, but you don't pay tax on the profit. But what was the source of cash? I don't, I don't know on that, but my gut would say no, and I would not report it as such, because the whole point of UBIT is it's an unrelated business activity to the fundamental mission of the organization, and that you effectively, you're basically operating a business under the guise of a not-for-profit or a business within a business. So with all that in mind, this was really a grant from the government to keep people off unemployment. Man, I'd have a hard time saying that that's UBIT for a not-for-profit. So that is one where there's no guidance currently, but I feel comfortable standing in front of the judge and say, what you talking about on that one.
You agree, Jack?
I agree with everything what he said, except for the fact to tell people not to do something until we actually know what. But Adam's willing to go up in front of the judge and say, okay, yes. But so yeah, I mean, it just common sense, exactly as Adam said. I mean, what is the purpose of that tax, and what is the purpose of these funds and forgiveness and everything related to the program? So for just from logic and practical application of each of those concepts, it seems like that is the probable end result.
So a couple comments. This is from Marguerite. I'm thinking CPAs are going to have a lot of fun come tax time. Oh yeah,
Yes.
we always have fun.
Yeah.
Well, because you don't have fun already? I mean, come on.
Yeah.
I'm having fun, and I'm not a CPA.
But every day is another day in paradise. Yeah.
This is from Karen. This is pretty funny. I have appreciated these webcasts from the standpoint of checking that I haven't missed seeing new development. My spouse has dubbed you the funny accountants. Sorry, Jack, for that.
Is that an insult or a compliment? I'm not sure at this point. I'm confused.
You take it however you want to, Jack.
Yeah.
Karen. We appreciate you guys. It really is a blessing to be able to be on with you guys and also have such really amazing business owners that are clients as well as just friends here in Charlotte and outside of Charlotte area that are on these crazy broadcasts. So thank you for what you do, because unlike Congress, you actually get stuff done, and you take tremendous risks every day to make that happen. And so we appreciate that very much. If you have any other questions, this is last call on questions. So anyway, and just having been in the streets of New York on 9/11, 2001, it's a very sobering day. But one thing that I would encourage every one of you to remember is remember how to care for one another, where that seems to be in short supply out there. But that's really important, because that's one of the things that I did get to see in the streets of New York that was pretty amazing, is actually how many people actually cared for other strangers. And we were bound by a tough situation, and we're in another tough situation. So thank you for what you do, for being ripple makers out there. Jack, thank you for being here, and love that background. You get the award this time. And Adam, thank you for being who you are. You're an amazing dude. We will put this up later on for anybody that had to dial in late. And thank you. Have a great rest of the day, rest of the week, and a weekend coming up. Take care.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. See ya.